everybody, welcome to your Research 367 class. We're going to start with our first chapter, which happens to be chapter 7. I know we're going a little backwards here, but the way that it's ordered doesn't quite make sense. So that's Theory in Research Frameworks. That comes out of this book here, Understanding Nursing Research. So we're on chapter 7 in there. So we're going to start with theory. So theory is a set of concepts or statements that presents a view of a phenomenon. So we talk about theories all the time in nursing. You guys probably remember all kinds of caring theory, model of such and such. There's so many theories in nursing that we kind of outdo ourselves. But it's basically a concept, an abstract object, an idea, an experience, whatever. So we don't really have a way to explain a theory or phenomenon, but we have a way of kind of connecting it together with other concepts. So it's a statement. It's a statement about how concepts are connected to each other. And then phenomenon is an awareness of an experience, whatever type of an experience it is. It can be a good one, it could be a bad one. It could just be something that we see in nursing. Maybe it's something we see in one type of nursing versus another type of nursing. But it's just something that's happened and that we've experienced and that we're trying to connect with other things. We're trying to make sense of our world. Human beings like to have things in nice little pockets so that we understand what and why things are connected, but a theory is an abstract and a general view of those phenomenons. So philosophy is a rational truth. So theory is kind of just an idea behind it, whereas a philosophy is, yeah, we know this and we know that. So a philosophy is a rational truth about something. It makes sense. It's got information to back it up. Concepts include things like constructs, which are a broader category of an idea. So for example, when I'm driving, there's a lot of very small variables, which are independent components of the concept that are combined together to create one driving experience, right? In my head, I know I have to stop at stop signs and stop lights. I know that I have to drive on the right side of the road versus the left side of the road as in other countries. When I combine all of those things together, the whole concept is called driving. And that's kind of the difference between concepts and variables when you're talking about theories. So as far as statements are concerned, that clarifies the relationship between those concepts. So when we can make a statement about something, that means it's proven to be true and accurate or inaccurate, and that's tested through research. So when we make a statement about something, there's a period at the end of it. There's no question mark. We know what the statement is. We know that it's correct or incorrect, whichever statement we're saying. And then propositions are relationships within theories. So those are things that we don't have concrete evidence for, but that we understand are probably a part of or correlated to the statement that we're making. So a general proposition, for example, is quality of life is related to depression. Okay? We know people who have depression have a lower quality of life. Specific propositions would be something like, among HIV patients, quality of life is related to depression. Okay, so we already know quality of life is related to depression. That's a statement. But what we have here is that we're now saying, among HIV patients, quality of life is related to depression. Okay. Now, a hypothesis gets it down even further, and that's the question we're asking. That's the scientific statement. So among African American persons getting HIV therapy, decreased physical functioning is directly related to the severity of depressive symptoms. So we went from a very general proposition of depression equals poor quality of life to this population who's getting this particular therapy have a decrease in this that's specifically related to that. So a hypothesis is something that's really defining every part of something that we're trying to look for or we're trying to study. So we have a bunch of grand nursing theories. So there are abstract or conceptual models or frameworks. For example, one of those is the Roy adaptation model, which is also called RAM. And people adapt when faced with stimuli either by learning or by homeostasis. So you all know somebody who just learns and learns and learns. I'm an example of that. I'm a learner. I love to learn everything. But there are people who just want to maintain their homeostasis. That's that nurse on your floor that is very interested in being a great nurse and is sometimes a very good nurse, but just is going to do the bare minimum to keep herself in that status. So we either want to learn more and we try to increase our knowledge about something because it makes us feel better, or we're just trying to keep up with our day-to-day lives so that we can function like we need to. There's also the self-care deficit theory. We should provide care in inverse proportions to an person's ability to perform self-care. So our walkie-talkie people should be doing walkie-talkie things, right? We see that when we get people up from surgeries. We want them to move. We want them to move not just because it helps with blood clots and circulation and all that good stuff. We want them to move because we want them to maintain the same self-care abilities that they had before they came to the hospital. And in fact, we don't just want them to stay the same, we want them to improve upon that. And most people don't improve unless you challenge them to do so. So that's kind of the examples of some theories or conceptual models or frameworks. There's also a theory of goal attainment. The person who's goal-oriented, so the nurse and the patient should set mutual goals, and all that work should be done to meet the goals. If your goal is to send the patient home to live by themselves, and their goal is to get into a skilled nursing facility because they don't feel like they can care for themselves, we have to talk about that, communicate at that, and meet in the middle. Because if we're fighting for one thing and they're fighting for something completely different, we're never going to land on the same thing. So those theories and concepts are all things that are related to each other. And when we know we have certain things or certain tendencies to put things into those little boxes, we can start to create theories around the bigger process. There's also middle range and practice theories. So they're less abstract, but still not super specific. It's more closely linked to clinical practice type of things, clearly identified concepts and relational statements. So for example, some of the practice theories that your book gives are caring theory, comfort, inner strength, nursing intellectual capital, and uncertainty in illness. And if you want to look at those more, we're not going to discuss them specifically, but if you want to look at them more, they are in your textbook. Well, that brings us to research frameworks. It's an abstract but logical way to link theory, findings, and nursing knowledge. So every single research study has a framework of some kind. And your job as you're going through these studies is to figure out what that framework is and what it means to, one, how accurate the information is within it, and how it affects your practices or your processes. So every research study does have that framework. It's either descriptive or experimental, typically, and those models demonstrate all the major concepts in research framework. So, this is kind of an example of a research framework here. We know we have some prior related behavior, we have personal behaviors, biological, psychological, sociocultural, and then those things kind of go into other areas. So, if we have prior related behavior that, we think we're self-efficacy is okay, our perceived barriers are not too high, and if our perceived benefit of action for whatever change it is we're trying to make is high enough that we're willing to make adjustments to our lifestyle, then that's when we start to get that health-promoting behavior. So this whole thing here is not just what you're going to find in every research study, but it's an example of how frameworks like this help correlate your research to research of others, and how others' research can be determined to be trustworthy or applicable to your situation. So there's some implicit frameworks. Be careful. You don't want unclear research frameworks. Beware of that in your papers. If you're reading through a study and you can't really figure out what the framework is, where are they trying to go? What is the correlation between what they're telling you and what you're seeing? If you can't find a clear framework in there, it's probably not a great study. Doesn't mean that they didn't have good intentions, doesn't mean that they didn't do the background work, but sometimes we don't set our experiments up in a way that actually makes them manageable or logical. We also have tentative theory. So this is for when we have a brand new proposed theory, nobody's ever done it before, and it's usually developed by further research. And the key here, if you have a brand new study or theory, there has to be a very detailed description of how the experiment is working and what the next experimenter needs to do to replicate their study. If you can't find enough information within one study to replicate it again, then that theory isn't developed enough or isn't delineated enough to actually use as an example. So why do you need frameworks? It actually increases understanding. It helps increase the validity of your own research, and it helps you determine the relationships that you need to make changes. So for you guys, we're not sitting here trying to come up with brand new therapies or brand new drugs or brand new ways of doing things for our patients. What we really want to do is take what we're doing and use evidence-based practice to improve on it. So if we can prove that we can decrease blood clots by having a team that goes around the hospital every hour and talks to patients about getting up out of bed or helping to in their bathroom or anything like that, and we can decrease the amount of side effects that we have from our major surgeries, then that would be something you want to research, you want a framework around it, and then you want to be able to apply those research studies and topics to what you think should happen to that patient. Later on down the road, if you continue, you'll take that idea and then you'll actually turn it into an experiment, and we'll see what happens when you actually apply it to something in real life. But the goal here is to prevent unclear delivery, so having a framework really helps you do that. That's it for Chapter 7. If you have any questions, let me know.